you can try your best to make things perfect, overthink things, really do as much prep as possible, but you'll never be fully prepared until you just start something. So
the GenTech podcast discussing business, investing, and marketing.
Hey guys, welcome back to the GenTech podcast, bringing you valuable discussion with top business owners. Today we have on Shannon Murphy. She is the founder of the Tampa Guide, which is an Instagram account with over 16,000 followers. It is her passion project, so I'm really excited to talk to her today about how she started it, her ideas for it, and how she uses social media in her business. So Shannon, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So I know you do a few different things. You have the Instagram, you're working, you even have your own Etsy company called Modern Blush Creative. So before we dive into that, I just want to get to know about you first. What were your interests that you think really drove you to these types of businesses and this type of career?
Yeah, so a little bit of background about me. Obviously, my name is Shannon. My dad was actually in the military growing up, so I moved around my entire life and I've lived a bunch of different places, but we always were primarily here in Tampa. So I've gotten to see the city over, different spans of my time. So I was here a little bit like in middle school, high school, and then also a little bit in college, and then now obviously post grad. So again, have seen Tampa kind of grow and develop over the years. Essentially, I started the Tampa Guide as my passion project. Still is my passion project. Like you said, I do work full time. I have a 9 to 5 corporate job here for a cybersecurity company headquartered in Tampa. So that's kind of my main priority. And then I just recently graduated from the University of South Florida with my MBA in international business and supply chain. So yep, the Tampa Guide's kind of on the side, but I have always been a very creative person. I've always really enjoyed Tampa, obviously, as a city. So I thought it would be perfect to kind of start an Instagram page. And I'm a huge foodie. I love trying new things, new coffee shops, things like that. So I figured, why not make a little side hustle out of it?
Of course. And I was even talking to you before. I've, thought so many times like, oh, I want to make an Instagram account about the food I eat or the things I do, or, oh, that'd be such a great idea. But it's such a difference between like actually doing it and having that idea. But I do want to go back. So that's so interesting. So you're a military baby. How many places have you lived in your life?
Yeah, I think I've lived probably like 5 different places maybe, just off the top of my head, but definitely Tampa was one of the, best places that I've lived. Lived a lot of places, traveled a lot of places, and I can confidently say Tampa is one of my favorite cities. So absolutely love it here, but I've lived in like Kansas, Germany at one point, up in Washington, D.C., just a couple, places around the U.S.
That is so interesting. And that definitely, you think like traveling around as a young child has made you fall in love with travel also. And, I would even consider you a travel blogger also.
Maybe a little bit, yeah.
You could definitely get into that. But so, you went to school. What'd you go to school for? What'd you first get your bachelor's degree in?
Yeah, so I got my Bachelor of Science in Marketing, actually, also at the University of South Florida. Really enjoyed marketing there. I think it was a really great degree. I feel like I learned so much. So go Bulls, obviously, local to Tampa too. But I decided not to work in the marketing field because I had a lot of marketing internships all throughout college, and I really enjoy marketing, but I enjoy marketing for myself more than I do for other people. So I knew that if I was going to continue to kind of stay in the realm of marketing, I would probably just do it for myself versus, working for a business, doing marketing or something like that. So I actually work in corporate recruiting for my 9 to 5, but love to have kind of, again, that creative outlet outside of work. And I think that the Tampa Guide specifically has very, strong branding around it. And I think that's something that makes the page stand out from others.
No, I completely agree. I was drawn to the Tampa Guide and I always look for it. And especially with the amount of people that are moving to Tampa and
Yeah.
following all these accounts, you really made your account at a perfect time. So how have you really seen Tampa grow since, you said obviously you traveled around a lot, but was always your home?
Yeah. So, Tampa has grown significantly over the last even 2, 3, 5 years.
Mhm.
It's always been a bigger city, but I feel like as more and more people move here and more of the city develops, it gets even bigger. Of course, I'm biased, but I think it's easily the best city within the state. So I think that just kind of seeing these new like restaurants pop up, things to do, expansion of the Riverwalk, Sparkman Wharf. I remember Channelside back in the day, like when I was in middle school, early high school, was just nothing. Like I think there was like a movie theater there and like a Cold Stone, and that was pretty much it. Past like the port for cruise ships. So just really seeing the expansion of Tampa has been amazing, and now we have that new development across from Amalie as well. And then even Midtown over by the highway. So I think that over the years, Tampa just gets better and better as time goes on. And I just think that there's, so much to do here. Like there's just so many activities, so many outdoor things that you can do, but then also so many small businesses here as well as, food and things to try.
I completely agree. And I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit more about the Tampa Guide and what your Instagram aims to do.
Yeah, so I kind of had always wanted to start like a Instagram, kind of back to your point of, oh, I've always wanted to share kind of like what I'm eating, things like that. So in my free time, I always like to go to new places. So I was like, how could I start sharing this with other people? I've always been the type of person to want to take photos of everything and kind of document things. So when the idea formulated, it was kind of around the time of the pandemic. So back in like 2019, 2020, during that time frame. And I thought to myself, what's the point in starting it now? Like, why would I start a food page when things are shutting down and closing? And the one thing that just really resonated and came back to me was, you just have to start now sometimes. So, it's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be the right timing, but I think it's important to act on something if it's something you're passionate about. So I just determined that I would go ahead and make the page, even though most things were shut down and we were kind of on quarantine, but I would at least have it and I could work towards something. But it kind of ended up being the perfect timing in the end. So a lot of the places that were closed started opening back up and doing like takeout and things like that. So the Tampa Guide really kind of started off as a way to push local businesses and give them a little bit of like organic media and things like that, just to kind of push people to get back out there and support local business during a time of need. But as it's developed and as time goes on and now things are a little bit more normal and things are open again, I just love to share kind of where I'm going, what I'm doing, what I'm eating, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. You would think during the pandemic it wasn't the time, but sometimes those pandemic ideas are the perfect time to start that stuff. Plus
Mhm.
all the free time you had, you
Yeah.
were able to really pinpoint on what you wanted to do and grow that brand in the time. And your Instagram page does such a great job at highlighting local businesses, which was also definitely needed at that time during the pandemic when their sales and their revenue were really low. So it's so nice to have a page that, like you said, it's just your passion. And if you're going to go eat anyways, like why not take a picture and why not share it? And I think that it's really amazing what you do, and
Yeah.
you have fun with it. And
Mhm.
did you ever get any perks or free food, or how does that work?
Yeah. So sometimes I do, obviously really grateful for it. And it is just a passion project of mine. So I never want to turn it fully into a business, because then I feel like it just doesn't, it's not as fun. But yep, sometimes I do get to do really cool stuff. So really grateful for the following and the people that support the page, because without them, I certainly couldn't do all of those things. But recently I've been working a little bit with the Lightning, going to some of the events that they're having. So that's super awesome. They've sent me like some swag and things like that. Of course, there's always restaurants and things that reach out, just to kind of like host for like an in-feed post, things like that. So really grateful for that as well. I got to hang out with Laura Beverlin one time. We made like a bouquet. That was really cool. I know she's more of kind of like a fashion blogger, but she's based out of Tampa. So just some really cool little things here and there for sure. But again, mostly is self-driven too. So, I don't always feel the need to be hosted all the time, things like that. Again, I'm really passionate about supporting local business. So I want to make sure that, I'm contributing to the community too.
And that's a great passion. And obviously, you have so much love for Tampa. I want to talk about your Etsy business also. So, your
Mhm.
Etsy business is called Modern Blush Creative, and you have a bunch of Tampa merch on there. We're talking about the beer can bottles that are the beer can glasses that are so trendy right now. And you have
Yeah.
all the 813. So, tell us about how you started that.
Yeah, so obviously apart from the Tampa Guide, I kind of have my own brand with my own personal Instagram. So I really wanted kind of like a third party outlet where I could sort of combine the two. So between my personal brand and the Tampa Guide, I've got Modern Blush Creative, and right now that's an Etsy store. I hope to kind of leverage that more in the future and also expand and grow that kind of area of the business too. But I'm obviously again passionate about coffee, so I figured beer can glasses would be the perfect thing. I feel like it's very fitting for both my personal brand and then also again the Tampa Guide. So yep, I started doing those. I've got a few of them up still. I want to do another launch hopefully when we hit 20K on the Tampa Guide. But essentially I just thought that would be another good way to kind of leverage my passion project as more of like a business. And yeah, it's been really successful so far. Definitely really time consuming for sure between, planning and then actually sourcing the product and launching it and shipping it, things like that. But yeah.
So, how does Etsy work? Where do you find your promotion? And do you kind of like use all your personal brand and the Tampa Guide to promote your Etsy store? How have you been doing with that?
I do, yeah. So I only pretty much promote it through my personal and then also the Tampa Guide. So it's all very organic. I don't pay for any type of like lead generation or paid media there. I know that, that's kind of you guys' platform. So I totally would. I think it's really great, especially if, you're hitting the proper target markets and things. But just right now, I obviously don't have a budget for it. So maybe in the future, as hopefully the brand kind of expands and grows. But yeah, right now it's just organic.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're doing a great job organic, and like your love for Tampa shows through in all your accounts. So I think that's important. And I love how you're talking about your personal brand because I definitely see that the
Mhm.
Tampa Guide and your own personal Instagram are super cohesive with each other and have those bright colors. And, I love that you also are putting your face on the Tampa Guide to, show that, this is a person. It's not just an account, and you are really passionate and love the places that you're going. So, want to tell us about your personal brand and maybe tell our listeners why it's just so important to have one? Because, like you said, you're bringing
Yeah.
your personal brand to the Tampa Guide. Now you're bringing it to this Etsy store, and how you can really leverage that.
Yeah, definitely. So, man, that's such a good question. I don't know if I've really considered my personal brand recently, so I'll try my best at this one. But I think your personal brand is obviously really important. People are always on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever social platform we're talking about. So obviously, it's good to have good representation for yourself in whatever that you do. So I just think that my personal brand in general is just to stay positive, to have fun in life and kind of just, live in the moment. So and obviously that's kind of hand in hand with Tampa, and that's kind of a big part of my personal brand too. So, but another thing is just kind of being authentic and genuine. And that's also tied back to me being tied to the Tampa Guide, right? Having really bright and fun photos is important to me. And I think that kind of resonates with my personality as well. So,
And
yeah.
you are a digital creator and a content creator, and you've been doing it for a pretty long time, I would say. So, I think you've probably noticed like companies and brands now, like every brand has to be a digital creator, and every small business owner, even if they don't want to be, they have to be a content creator and stay on these trends. And now they have to do TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, all of those. So, what
Right.
advice do you have to business owners on Instagram and how to keep up with this content creation, especially small business owners that can't outsource a marketing agency or a content creator?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, being authentic is what's most important. And I think being relatable is perceived well by audiences. So just really sticking to whatever your kind of brand is, and just being authentic within that, I think is important. And that'll really shine through, especially if, you have limited budget and things like that.
Yeah, so how did you teach yourself? I know you did go to school for marketing and
Mhm.
you're getting your MBA. So how did you teach yourself how to, use TikTok and use Reels? Did it just come naturally or
Yeah, I would say that it came naturally, but also, just the more time you spend on a platform, the more you're going to learn about it, and the more you use it, the more you're going to understand the different features of it. So, just really mostly self-taught. Sometimes I'll look things up or Google things. I actually just found out about bonuses the other day for Reels on Instagram. Had no idea that was a thing. So, looked into that, set it up. The Tampa Guide actually is eligible for it, so that's pretty cool. But I feel like social media too is always ever changing. So it seems like there's new updates and new platforms and new capabilities within things all the time. So I just think staying updated and finding kind of like relevant resources for different platforms frequently is important too.
yeah, and like you said, you started this during the pandemic. Instagram Reels weren't even a thing yet. So when they first came out, did you hop right on it? Because I mean, those are just perfect for your content.
Yeah, so I guess I didn't really hop on it right away. I'm kind of a late adapter in that sense. I kind of feel like TikTok has a monopoly over videos right now, although it does seem like Instagram's trying to get audience to kind of switch over to do the all-in-one platform. Obviously, Instagram never used to have stories. That's a feature that's, relatively new. Like it's been around for a couple years at this point, but it didn't used to have it. So I think it's kind of interesting how Instagram is trying to encompass different portions of different socials all into one. So love that. But I will say I don't make as many reels as I should, and I should definitely get more into video content, although it's definitely something I'm, currently working on, trying to be more mindful of taking more videos and kind of editing those together because not only do they do well in terms of an audience, but they're also fun to make and they're also really cool to look back on too.
Yeah, and like you said, it really is crazy how every social media platform is kind of like turning into each other.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've talked about this before on the podcast, but I love talking about it because it's just so true how much these platforms are really fighting for content creators. And
Yeah.
Instagram is seeing how well TikTok is doing. So they really want to have the content creators make more content and they see how well videos do. So
Yeah.
Reels are really getting pushed in the algorithm. And definitely the Tampa Guide needs to, keep with the Reels because they will do good. So is the Tampa Guide, I want to ask, I know you're on Pinterest too, but what other platforms are you on besides Instagram?
Yeah, so for the Tampa Guide, I'm actually not, unfortunately. I hate that that's the answer, but as a busy gal who was just in school full time, also working in corporate full time, and then of course a couple things outside of that, and then also still trying to maintain a social life. As a 24-year-old, I do only have it on both Instagram and Pinterest right now, but maybe in the future I would move to TikTok. I think what makes the Tampa Guide unique too is, I am the brand behind the Tampa Guide and I am just the sole person that is in charge of the page. So a lot of other Tampa pages do have kind of like a team behind it. So at least one, two people, maybe even a handful of people who are kind of behind the scenes running, captions, photos, content, blog, whatever it is. So maybe if I had a little bit more help, I would definitely expand. But again, it's my passion project, so I don't want to make it too much work for myself to the point where it becomes, not very fun for me anymore. But yeah, right now just on Instagram and Pinterest.
So when you started the Tampa Guide, when you started your Etsy business, were you in school to get your MBA?
So when I started the Tampa Guide, I was actually still in college for undergrad. So I believe it was either the end of my junior year or early my senior year. So
Okay.
yeah.
So how do you balance, life and work, especially with a social media job? Sometimes it can feel like, even when you're just scrolling on social media, you're working because, you're on TikTok or you're looking at reels for, your own pleasure. But in the back of your mind, it's like, oh, this is a good trend for my business and stuff. So it kind of feels like you're always working. How did you balance that in your life?
Yeah, so definitely tough. It's definitely not for everyone. But again, I have a lot of passion for it and a lot of drive for it. So I think it just works out and my personality kind of matches that. I thrive off of being busy and staying busy and kind of always working towards something. So having that kind of outside of school is a really nice thing to have kind of on the side. So definitely tough to balance. It does feel like I'm always working, whether that's at my job or, in school or kind of managing socials. But again, it's just so much fun. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I just try and give myself grace sometimes, give myself balance within my days where I can, because sometimes I am just far too busy for my own good. But yeah, I think just being mindful that sometimes, I don't always have to be super busy or working towards something or churning out content. So just kind of letting myself do things on my own time frame, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I do enjoy your content so much, like I said, and I feel like it really is tailored towards, someone moving to Tampa and thinking like, where do I go eat? Where do I get a drink? Where do I get a coffee? So how do you really tailor your content to your audience, and maybe advice to listeners on how they should try to tailor their content to their audience?
Yeah, so obviously tailoring your content is super important. I don't necessarily think that you need to have a niche per se. I know that's advice from a lot of people and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think you can do kind of a lot of different things under one umbrella. But just really kind of making sure that again, just back to that authentic point, is just being authentic in whatever you do. For me, it just, I think, honestly comes naturally because I enjoy doing a lot of the same things. But if I were to give advice, I don't know, I would just say, determine what you really want your purpose to be. I think the Tampa Guide's purpose is to be helpful and to provide value. And, it's not necessarily the most formatted or thought out like food blog, I guess you could say. But I do hope that it provides some type of, again, value and resource to the people that are looking at it. So just making sure that value piece is there, and past that, really whatever you do would be up to kind of your own personal brand and things. But I think that's what draws people to.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, it takes a lot of work to, make that Instagram. Although it is fun to go to these restaurants and get those drinks, you are sacrificing, maybe your time there, because instead of just enjoying your meal or enjoying your drink, you're taking those pictures and that content. And
Mhm.
I think that also like can be hard on people with this job and in like this type of industry. So how do you even like balance that, being able to not just let yourself relax at a restaurant, like you need to take those content pictures?
Yeah, that's a really great question, actually. I feel like that topic comes up in discussion between, personal relationships of mine. So I think it's important to just be cognizant that that's a thing. Not everyone does social media, and not everyone is constantly taking photos of things like you are. So for myself personally, I just try and, be aware that, we're here to eat dinner and I'm going to maybe take a few photos of things, but past that, I'm going to put my phone down. So I'm always going to get the content, but I also think it's important to live in the moment. So just kind of having a balance between the two is important. And I think it takes a little bit of effort to kind of work on those two things. But just knowing that it doesn't have to be perfect. Like the food does not have to be laid out exactly how you need it to be. But just get it good enough, snap a quick, photo, take a quick video of it, save it, and you can get the content up later, edit later, things like that. So
Yeah, phone eats first all the times.
absolutely. It does.
Yeah, that's also such great advice. I definitely am guilty with, taking pictures.
Mhm.
And sometimes like you could take like 50 pictures of a plate and you feel like, oh, like that's not good enough for my story, or if you want
Right.
to post it. And that type of perfection can be paralysis and, can make a lot of people just not even post their content. So that
Yeah.
is really great advice. And I mean, did that take some time at first? Because obviously, like you said, it's your passion and you want everything to be perfect, but it
Right.
is very time consuming and can almost stop you sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm definitely a perfectionist in anything that I do, but I also think that you have to, again, give yourself grace. And another thing too is like, no one is ever as critical of yourself or anything that you make, like no one's more critical than you are of yourself. So, maybe you've taken like a little video of something or a boomerang or a photo, whatever it is, excuse me. And maybe you see something wrong with it, but that's not to say someone else is going to look at that same photo and think the same thing. So I think just knowing like not everything has to be perfect. I feel like back in the day, everything on Instagram had to be super curated, super edited, really well put together, very posed. And I feel like, now we're kind of moving more towards things being more casual. Obviously, I still edit my photos. I still post things. I still, line up foods and put them in specific places and things. So it's definitely one of those things that you're putting thought into, but it also does not need to be perfect, and that's okay.
Yeah, Instagram and social media platforms alike, like LinkedIn, are becoming more casual. So I agree. But also what's becoming really huge is aesthetic and people
Yeah.
having that platform and you're able to look at anyone's Instagram and see a grid now. Everyone's all about the grid. And these are all really new things that everyone's just trying to keep up with, like having that cool aesthetic that's, not too try hard and very comfort, but also like having a grid that's like perfectly laid out in a pattern. So have you also like seen that? That's a super new trend. You try to have a grid and a vibe with your Instagrams.
Yeah, I think I do. And I think a lot of having a cohesive grid or like a vibe to your page is definitely staying consistent within your editing. I know for me personally, like I take photos that have good lighting, it's nice and bright, lots of colors. I also try and just, make sure everything is within frame. So definitely, I think those things need to kind of be consistent for you to be able to make a cohesive grid or a cohesive feed. But again, I think that's one of those things where it's like people can be overcritical of kind of what they're doing, what they're working on. And I don't specifically think that it needs to be, that much pressure on having like the perfect grid. So yes, it's important, but also at the same time, it's not something I'll like plan around for. I know lots of people do, but I don't personally.
I mean, it works for you. So
Right, exactly.
yeah, and I just want to transition to social media and just like advice you have. So what's the first thing you would say to someone who's like, I want to start a blog about this and I have 0 followers. Like, what are the first steps that they need to do to grow their Instagram account?
Yeah, so I think the first step would be, and I know that you and I have kind of talked a lot about this during our conversation today, but is you just need to have a passion for whatever you're going to do. So whether it's going to be like a fashion blog or about food, or maybe it's about, the field that you work in, whatever it's going to be, I think you need to have passion behind it, because I think a lot of people will take a look at these Instagram pages and think like, wow, like they have so many followers and these photos look so good. But they don't realize all of the work that is behind it and that goes into it. And it's much more time consuming than people assume. It's much more than just an Instagram page. So I think sometimes people have this short-lived like passion inside them to want to start something so that they can gain a big following and they can, have like they can get a comped meal or get paid to do something, or set up their like to know it and make commissions on things like that. But they'll only do it for a short period of time because they don't have the passion for it. And then it ends up falling off and it goes nowhere. So I think first and foremost, like you've got to just want to do it for yourself and no other alternative motive. Otherwise, it's just not going to work out in the end. I think that would be my biggest piece of advice.
I completely agree with that because you're so right. I know so many people, honestly, who've made that second Instagram and they want to post all their outfits on there. They want to post everything they eat or everything they cook on there. And it's always very short lived. Like
Right.
they will be into it for a month and then you're following a page that's just not even active anymore. So
Totally.
being super consistent, and that
Yes.
does come from passion. Like you have to be so passionate about it because like you said, like you shouldn't have any other alternatives or motives for it. If it's not pure passion when you're starting this account, then
Right.
you're not going to have the drive to keep it active.
Right. And there's typically not a whole lot of ROI in the beginning of things, right? And that could be for anything past social media, just in business in general. So I think that, it just takes so much more time than people expect. Like it could take a year, 2 years for things to really start building momentum. So I just think patience and patience is very important when starting something like that.
Although you have 16,000 followers, you've worked so hard to grow your account. And I think that's really important because like you said, like it's an Instagram account, but there is work that goes into it.
Right. And it just doesn't happen overnight. So like you said, consistency is key.
How do you use social media? Obviously, it's super important to you, but how do you continue to grow the Tampa Guide? And what do you think the importance of social media is to you as your personal brand, your Etsy account, just everything? Like, how important is it for you?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of continuing to grow the Tampa Guide, I mean, this is something I think about a lot, especially, recently graduating and having a little bit more free time on my plate. It's like, really, how can I leverage this and take it to the next level? So it's definitely things I've been thinking about. I do want to expand kind of on the brand in general, kind of just our branding. I would like to update that and restructure that, kind of give it a fresh look at some point. I'd like to continue expanding Modern Blush with, beer can glasses, getting them into local boutiques and shops here in Tampa. I think that would be a good way to get the community involved too. And just kind of, again, how can I add more value to the people that are following the page, viewing the page, seeing these posts? How can I be a better resource to them? That's definitely on the forefront too. So all things I'm looking at and kind of working towards, but I'm sorry, what was the second part of it? It was
just like how important is social media to you and your personal brand also?
That's right. So how important is it? I mean, I think it's largely important, right? I think marketing is so important. I think social media in general is very important, and so is your personal branding. So again, it's just marketing, it's just business. We're not saving lives out here with it or anything, but certainly from like a business perspective, it's huge, right? So people are going to see what you're doing, what you're posting, where you're at, things like that. So you just always want to be cognizant of who's viewing, who could be viewing your things, who's looking at it, and know that your reach and expansion on things is also important too. So very, very important for sure.
Did you ever expect the Tampa Guide to get this big? Like you said, you were enjoying doing the content, but did you ever expect for this type of following and this type of audience to be, so invested?
Yeah, I would say no. So when I first initially started the page, I really had no idea kind of where it would go. And I didn't really have any expectation for it. So I've been pleasantly surprised at how many people have been so supportive of it and how many people have, followed along. And now as it grows and gets bigger, again, I'm even more cognizant of, how do I provide value here? How do I make this better? How do I bring people back to want to, use this page or things like that. So again, now that I have a little bit more time, I'm hoping to kind of capitalize on the page itself and just make it better as a whole for everyone. But yeah, definitely just, always looking to improve and strive to do a little bit better each day for sure.
Yes, and you're definitely providing value to the whole Tampa community. I mean, myself included, I have been here for about a year, and the first thing I did was go on Instagram and find all these Instagram accounts because that's where you look now. And have you also seen that as a trend? Like people used to, I mean, I still use Yelp and everything, but Instagram is where a lot of people are getting their ideas of where to go to dinner and where to get drinks and where to get coffee. So
Totally.
have you really seen that as a new trend also?
Absolutely. And I use Instagram myself for the same purpose, especially if I'm traveling to a new city that I don't know very well. So looking up hashtags like, I'll just use Tampa because that's where we're at, but like Tampa blogger, Tampa foodie, Tampa eats out, like things like that. So important. Also, obviously using geolocations is important too. Or I'll look up like Tampa foodie blogger, things like that. So those hashtags and those locations are going to bring you to those people who are kind of within that niche, whether it's, Chicago, New York, Austin, Boston, whatever city you want to go to. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, myself, I look things up that way. And I mean, the bookmark feature on Instagram is phenomenal. So I bookmark things all the time, make little folders, reflect back on them. So I think that's a really great way to add value too, is to make content that people want to save and use for later.
And I love that you mentioned hashtags. I think that's also like a huge part of your business that we should definitely mention. How do you, find those hashtags that you think you'll get the most reach at? And do you really use your insights to see, okay, like these hashtags got me, 500 views. So how are you utilizing these hashtags to get higher reach and engagement?
I wish I had a more analytical response to that. And I wish I could tell you I look at my insights and kind of base it off of that. But unfortunately, I don't. I feel like I'm the worst when it comes to things like that. It's definitely something I take a look at and I'm impressed by sometimes. I'm like, wow, the reach on this was huge. And I wonder why that is. But in terms of actually choosing hashtags, I feel like that's always something that's ever changing too, especially with the algorithm. I feel like you used to put them in the body and then people were saying like, oh, don't put them in the body. You're going to want to put them in the comments and you're going to want to put up to 30. And then at some point recently, I think it was back to the, main portion of the caption and you should really only use like 3. So I feel like the actual strategy on that is always changing, especially with the algorithm. But essentially I just pick hashtags that are specific to Tampa. So I kind of just randomly choose, whatever I'm posting about, but typically it's one of the ones I've mentioned.
And to kind of wrap up, I want to ask a few more questions. In 5 years, where do you see the Tampa Guide going, or where would you hope?
Gosh. Yeah. So in 5 years, I think in a perfect world, it continues to grow, right? I don't know to what number or where it'll be, but hopefully it continues to grow. Hopefully it continues to add value. And hopefully I can kind of expand on the brand itself. I would also in the future love to do kind of like some type of like social media consulting on the side in addition to my 9 to 5. And then also just kind of like overall branding and things like that. So definitely a lot of ideas up in my head, but in 5 years, I just hope that it's still around, it continues to grow and people are still enjoying it.
Definitely. And one last question I'll ask for you. What do you hope our listeners who are maybe, really wanting to start that Instagram account that they're really passionate about, what is the biggest takeaway that you hope our listeners learn?
Yeah. So biggest takeaway I think is to just do it. Honestly, just start. You can try your best to make things perfect, overthink things, really do as much prep as possible, but you'll never be fully prepared until you just start something. So yeah, that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Awesome. So I'm just gonna, go back over a few of the key points that we touched on. So again, this is Shannon Murphy. She is the founder of the Tampa Guide on Instagram. She also has her own Etsy business called Modern Blush Creative. And we talked a lot about, being really passionate about whatever project that you choose. The Tampa Guide is her passion project, and that is why it's so successful today, because she really enjoys it and has that passion and has been consistent with it for these all these years. So consistency is key. She talks about having the passion and not having any other alternatives or motives, and that's how you will make that Instagram account and stick to it and hopefully to reach that growth. And just a lot about patience and providing value to your audience, knowing your audience and always wanting to provide that value and give them more and more so they keep coming back to you. So Shannon, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Do you want to tell our audience where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, so obviously the Tampa Guide is going to be my main page, but my personal is Hey Girl, It's with a Z Shanman.
Love that. And you can find us at GenTech Marketing. Shannon, thank you so much for being on the podcast again, and we'll see you guys next week.